Just a comment about the setup. I made this, which was very simple. A couple of 2x4s, piece of stock from pressboard, 6x6. Fits down here very nicely. Gives me a stable platform for when I want to cut light wood. So that's wood that's too small to stick out over the end of the sawhorse, because it'll actually just crack off. Bit heavier wood. No real issues. Make a nice clean V. Very easy. A couple comments about saws. This is a Felco. See, this has a very coarse tooth pattern. It's made to cut green wood and softwoods. This is a relatively hard piece of dimensional lumber, but even worse, it has square corners on it. Most of these saws are made to work natural woods. A lot of the times you'll see in videos people are just using scrap woods to test out some of the materials and not understanding that you can get problems because, again, they're not taking into account this is meant to cut a round piece of wood. It doesn't react very well to corners. So you don't want to start off on the corners, you want to start off on the flats to mimic the round piece of wood. Now, you also have to take the suitability of the saw into account. This is, again, a very coarse tooth pattern. That means it takes a lot of effort to pull it through the wood. That means you have to stabilize the wood where you're offhand, unless it's inherently stable as it's still attached to something. So a saw like this, trying to cut up these pieces of wood, has a relatively high rate of fatigue because I'm actually doing more work trying to keep the wood stable than I actually am sawing it. Now I can make this even more neutral, in which case this is almost zero rake, it's only probably around 10 degrees. So it will exert very little force back on the wood. The nice thing though about the saws is that, unlike the blades, you can actually use them even with a relatively severe injury. So, assuming that these three fingers weren't completely incapacitated, and that shows you just how little force you're using. I'm only pinching the saw. Now, I can hold this with a pinch with my index and thumb. I have almost no control over the blade. Now, the reason why it's bouncing out is because I have no ability to put follow through into this. So I can't drive the blade into the wood. My accuracy is much less because the blade is twisting. So you can see the penetration is less. You can see the wood is getting damaged because the blade is twisting around in it. And just for comparison, that's the difference. We did a full grip and a slight pinch grip. So a large blade like this does demand that you have relatively close to full strength in an uninjured hand. And if my shoulder was injured, my elbow was injured, this becomes a lot less useful. This is with my left hand. Now, just a show, of course, it has nothing to do with dimensional lumber in particular. Here's a piece of very well seasoned deadfall. Where the saws can also be useful is when you're working with OSB and plywood type materials. You're not going to find them in the woods, but working on scrap, when they're small like this, it's not that bad cutting with a knife. It should be obvious. That's relatively easy. Compared to still not difficult, but you can see there's no way you'd pick that over the knife. But as it gets wider, sooner or later, you're going to come to a piece that you can't do that to. Now, this is still fairly narrow, but it's rather thick. And that becomes a problem cutting plywoods and OSB. This gets jammed really heavily. Now this is a really strong blade, so that's the easiest solution there. Or just hit it a bit harder. So to cut through. But you're not going to be able to do that here. You're going to end up with this. Now, get out. This would also want chip release, so you've got to make the cuts intersect. Now you can imagine if that was just a little bit longer so that this wouldn't connect, I'd have to go through the same notching process on that side. Because it takes so much energy to release, you can't get a nice smooth flow, you can't build up any kind of rhythm, and it's just annoying. So of course it takes longer as it gets wider, but not any more difficult. Whereas the blade gets dramatically more difficult as it gets wider. And if this was twice as wide, it just takes twice as long with the saw. It no longer takes twice as long with the blade, because you got to make multiple notches because it won't clear a large notch.